All right, so as I said before, my ex had the abortion. I wrote her an essay kind of describing how, because I knew that she wasn't responding to me, but I knew that in her mind she's thinking his own parents won't talk to him. He must be a bad guy. Why do I have to talk to him if his parents won't talk to him? She's probably mentally ill, but I tried to explain to her, listen, I was a victim, and they don't realize I discovered theory of everything. But if the crazy stuff wouldn't have happened in high school with the shoot away machine and all that, I think if I would have discovered the quadrant model, the theory of everything, they wouldn't have been so quick to assume that I was mentally ill. Like I said, they already had an antagonism toward me. So as I described, and I wrote this to my ex, like in high school, my shot got messed up. It was because of the shoot away machine. I was always the best. My dad's telling me, Ryan, shoot sideways, spin into it. And he's telling me to do the wrong thing. Because I'm picking the ball off the rack and I'm moving straight forward. That's not how good shooters shoot. And it's just sad. My dad, and remember, my grandpa had made that rule, like, never blame. So I would always say, it was a shoot away machine, but really it was my dad. My dad was a stupid one who messed me up. But again, I forgive him and I want to move on. I'm like, it's fine. You tried your best. You messed up. Now let's move on. But the sad thing is he won't move on because in his mind, my mom and dad tried to make me into the bad guy. I tried to tell my mom. And his mom was like, Mom was like, oh my God, you think it was a shoot away? Oh my God, it was because you couldn't handle the pressure. You couldn't handle the pressure and you became mentally ill. You haven't done anything since middle school. And in my mind, I'm like, dude, I discovered the theory of everything and it was a shoot away machine. And if they would have just helped me, like I said, if they would have just helped me get basketball videos of when I was younger, I could have, I lost the swag flow in college. I could have got back. I could have got a lot of stuff better, but I was abandoned. And like I said, it started in high school when like I said, my grandpa came in. My grandpa's like, well, Ryan really wants his independence. Because he's an Ayn Rand fan. He's like, independence is what he really wants. It's what everybody wants. And this is normal. So then I went to live with my grandpa. And like I said, when I was with my grandpa, I would call my mom. Or when I was staying with my friend to farm, I would call my mom. I'd be like, Mom, can I come home? And my mom would be like, no, you can't come home. You just have to accept that. You just have to accept it. Because I would be like, Mom, I want to see Dad. No, you have to accept it. Because my grandpa came in and he was like, Ryan, you just have to accept everything is fine. Everything is fine. But like I said, it was emotional abuse because I'd be like, okay, Mom, can we leave? And she'd be like, you're such a piece of shit. What are you 17 years old and need your dad, you little fucking pussy? You're such a fuck. I'm embarrassed that your dad doesn't want anything to do with you. He's embarrassed he has a little pussy for a son that needs his daddy when he's 17 years old, you fucking pussy. And like I said, it was emotional abuse. And I would be like, Mom, can we please leave on a good note? I love you. I don't fucking love you. I fucking hate you. I'm embarrassed to have a pussy for a son. And just hang up on me. Like I said, you just hang up on me. So, and like I said, people like my grandma told me that my mom was a bad person. But I never, like growing up, it was great because I was the best. So my mom and dad loved me. And like I said, if anything, they spoiled me. I never had to do anything. I never did chores. My mom and dad, like I had a friend over one time. And my mom said something to me like, Ryan, go, Ryan. And I said, what? And my friend was like, what? You said what to your mom? You're supposed to say yes. But like I said, my mom and dad never had any discipline for me. I never once did any chores. I never was put on timeout. Nothing. So basically, so but I was trying to tell my ex this stuff. I was trying to text her. This is before the abortion. Because she wouldn't get back to me. And I was basically trying to tell her, like, listen. And I also wanted to let her know, like, and also this is part of the reason why I got angry at her daughter. Because her daughter told me to leave. And, I was helping them. And then I put the daughter outside. But the reason why I got angry was, and I wanted to blame her. I was like, I've been abused. And I've been abandoned by my family. So her daughter telling me to leave, that hurts me. And I was already on edge. And she was already treating me bad. And a part of it was because, she's thinking, she wanted to meet my mom and dad for Thanksgiving. And my mom and dad won't meet her. And she's assuming, Ryan must have mental problems like his mom believes. Because a lot of people don't imagine that people's parents can abandon them unless there's something really wrong with the person. But I'm trying to let her know there's nothing wrong with me. It was a shoot away machine. I was the best. And I discovered the theory of everything. There's nothing wrong with me. But it's a tragedy. But so basically, yeah, and even like when I got upset with her when she was texting the other guy and I stayed in her place and I wanted to know who she was texting, like I was already uptight because she wanted to talk to my mom and I'd been texting my mom the whole day and my mom wouldn't respond. And I was already on edge and I was already uptight. And that's a part of the reason why I also was getting angry, And then And then when my when my ex and then when I wouldn't leave, my ex called my mom, and my mom's like, "Oh, see, I told you, you even are abusive to a fucking pregnant woman, you fucking piece of shit." And then she stops giving me money again. And this is why, a part of the reason why I was also a Marxist, because I'm like, my friend Noah, who was kind of a Marxist, he's like, yeah, instead of sending people to jail, what you should do is you should put them in what they did in in African tribes, they would put the person in the center of the tribe, and everyone would tell the person how much they loved him. Because the reason why he's a criminal is because he's abused, and he's responding to his abuse. And I want to be like, yeah, that's the case with me. Like, I'm abused, and that's why I'm acting out. If my mom and dad would just talk to me, I could be playing basketball, I could be doing a lot of great stuff if they would just talk to me. But they're not. They could, instead of being like, I don't want anything to do with you, I want you out of my life, I fucking hate you. I discovered theory of everything. I don't deserve that. If they would just be like, and yes, I lost the swag flow. But if they would have just talked to me, yeah, Ryan, what would you like? Can we listen to you? We'll be understanding. We'll try to understand you. We'll try to comprehend. We'll listen. Oh, you want the basketball video so you can study swag flow? You lost the swag flow. You were the best in the nation. Yeah. Okay. If they could be a little bit compassionate, but they're not. So, but then, as I said, I was trying to get in touch with my ex. She wouldn't respond to me. I was nervous because she said in order for the baby to survive, I needed to be taking care of her. And she wasn't responding to my text. And that made me think that she's probably gonna get an abortion because she said that in order for the baby to survive, I need to take care of her. Or my mom, but my mom, like I said, wouldn't take care of her because my mom wouldn't come to LA because my mom didn't want to be around me because my mom had abandoned me. And she hadn't seen me for 20 years. And she assumes, she'd never give me a chance. She assumes that I was the bad guy in high school, and really I wasn't. I was a victim, and she, and I'll get to that. So then, as I said, my ex got the abortion. But like I said, a big part of the, I felt bad for my ex because in my mind I was like, this isn't, my ex was kind of, herself was a victim to this situation, and like I say, I blame my mom and dad. And my grandpa, don't blame anyone, blame the software. It's not them, it's the software. But the fucking thing about that is my grandpa doing his fucking weird shit didn't help. If my grandpa would have just been fucking normal, but my grandpa say if you're in the flow, he's not like Jesus. My grandpa would say that Jesus could discern what needed to be done. My grandpa just like, if she doesn't ask any questions, I'm not going to give the answers. And, my grandpa didn't help. My grandpa made things worse. But anyways, my ex ended up getting the abortion and afterwards, but then I called my grandpa, and my grandpa was talking to me, and like I said, my grandpa had stopped teaching me because my grandpa was like, he said he was going to stop teaching me because I resented him and because he didn't want to be exposed to my software. But as I said, at the time I was a Marxist and all that stuff, and I didn't understand my grandpa's teachings, but I'll get to when I started to understand my grandpa's teachings. But my grandpa texted me or my grandpa was talking to me, and my grandpa felt bad about the abortion. So my grandpa started teaching me again. So it ended up being good. And like I said, so I started studying with my grandpa again. And but to make my grandpa happy, so he would start studying with me again, I wrote an essay describing, trying to take responsibility, because I knew that my grandpa was into taking responsibility. But again, I didn't understand. My grandpa, it's not about you taking responsibility. It's about taking responsibility for your software. But my software still wasn't. I still saw things in a Darwinian sense, and I was still a Marxist. So I'll get to that. But as I said, the ironic thing was, like, I was a Marxist. So before my ex got the abortion, like I said, I would hang out with the Jewish people and the hippies and the basically the Satanists and go to the parties and stuff, and they'd all do drugs, and they're polyamorous, and they're basically Satanists. A lot of them are Jewish because, Jewish people, a lot of them are anti-religion Marxists because they're against victim blaming, and they're against the white man because, they're leftists, right? So, even the spiritual ones, they're very much for race mixing, and a lot of the Jewish girls have black boyfriends. They don't like white people, a lot of the black, even the black white Jew, it's a very common thing. But anyways, so I remember, like, I was messaging my ex before she had the abortion, like, I didn't want her hanging out with Sylvie because Sylvie's a Jewish girl. And I was telling my ex, you're a white girl. You're not Jewish. You have a Jewish stepdad, but you're not Jewish. Why are you hanging out with Sylvie, who's a Jewish leftist who, very, very into feminism, very into the spiritual drug using crowd? And, I was like, these people are Satanists. They're Marxists. And, they're basically like, they're into drugs, they're into like race mixing and stuff. And like I said, my ex, because she was a part of that crowd, because she was friends with Sylvie, this Jewish girl, she would do the race mixing stuff. She had a lot of sex with a bunch of guys, and she had a lot of abortions before. She was promiscuous because, the Jewish leftists, they're anti-religion because they're anti-white. And so they're into Freudianism ideas, and so they're into promiscuity and stuff, and they're basically Satanists. They're anti-religious because they see religion as white supremacist. So, and they think that religion divides people, and they want everyone to mix because they don't like the white people. So I was like, I was trying to tell my ex, you're not Jewish, so don't hang out with these Jewish girls who are Satanists and, race mixing. They're all into race mixing with black guys and doing drugs and, self-indulgence type of stuff. And so but it's ironic because before this I was a Marxist and I was a leftist too, and I was anti-religious, and I was like, the left-handed path, and thinking the good is bad and the bad is good. The people who are conformity, like Indra, he pretends to be humble, but he's not really humble. And the demons are actually the good guys, and demigods are actually the bad guys in Hindu mythology. And left-handed path, you can get in the flow better than the right-handed path. And so I was more of a Satanist and a leftist and Marxist, anti-religion, thinking that religion's self-confirmatory. The white people who are religious, they just want to maintain the white race, and that's self-confirmatory. You should be for race mixing type of thing. That's the way I saw things, right? But then and so I was for open borders, immigration. I was for because I wanted to destroy the white man, because I was a leftist. But then the ironic thing is, apparently when my ex had her abortion, her baby dad, who was a Salvadorian guy, was at the abortion. That's what her friend told me. She said that before my ex got the abortion, she talked to her baby dad, and then she went in and got the abortion. So probably her Salvadorian baby dad talked her in, encouraged her to get the abortion, to kill my baby, which is ironic because I was for, I think this guy's a legal Salvadorian immigrant. I was for immigration. And then, I was for destroying the white man. And then, so my dualistic software, ended up destroying me. The dualistic software I was expressing, the poison I was letting out ended up poisoning myself. And then my own baby got aborted with the encouragement of a Salvadorian immigrant. And I was for immigration. And because I wanted to destroy the white race, because I saw myself as Jewish and I was anti-white. So but anyways, so then my ex had the abortion, but then I started writing my based on true story. I started writing a book to get my grandpa to start teaching me again, and I was trying to take responsibility. So in the book, I was still leftist, and I was being like, I should have let my ex go to the party and not been upset, because my ex just wants to expand her awareness, and basically I tried to make myself out to be the bad guy, but I wasn't the bad guy. And I felt really bad for, because I was saying that, I shouldn't have gossiped, and I shouldn't have gone online and talked about my ex, trying to, but when I look at it, it's like, well, my ex wasn't talking to me, and she was going to get an abortion, I thought, because she said I needed to take care of her while she was had her shirt closed and while she was on bed rest. So I was freaking out. So, a lot of people would have gone online and seeked help, and a lot of people would have had parents like my parents who would have helped in the situation, but I didn't have anybody. I was isolated. I was alienated. I didn't have anybody. My parents wouldn't help me. No one was helping me. So I had to go online to try to get help and tell people what was going on. So yeah, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Maybe I was trying to make things happen. I wasn't in the flow. That's what my grandpa would say. But at the same time, put yourself in my situation. And a big part of the problem was, my grandpa's like, don't make things happen. Just be in the flow. But if my grandpa wouldn't have, my grandpa didn't help. As I said, his help ended up isolating me and alienating me from my family. You have to accept things and just, no, and he says, oh, I just cast pearls of swine. Your mom and dad misinterpreted my teachings. But regardless, my mom and dad have used his teachings in a negative way of being uncompassionate, throwing me to the side, not listening to me, and not being good parents. And, but I tried to make myself out to be the bad guy. And I felt bad for, going online and gossiping about my ex and stuff. But the thing was, anybody in these situations would have done it. And I blame my parents. If they would have just been there for me, if they would have met my ex for Thanksgiving, if I wouldn't have been so alienated, then I wouldn't have had to go online and try to get help and tell people about what was going on. And, and it's just sad, but and I wouldn't have had her got her pregnant in the first place if I would have probably been playing professional basketball. I would have had the quadri model out. I wouldn't have been in this situation. But my parents have alienated me and abandoned me, thrown me to the side, and it's not right. So, all right.